It's handled. She won't be a problem. Just finish the deal. Don't contact me again. She won't be an issue anymore. I'll make sure of it. Her place, her home, her family, they belong to you now. Everything is already in motion. She has no idea.
While doctors were fighting to keep me alive, my Korean Mafia husband was choosing our nanny to replace me. Not after I died. Not after a divorce. Not after one honest conversation. While I was still breathing through pain. While my wedding ring was still on my finger. While my children still called me mommy. Kang Min-jun stood outside my hospital room, phone pressed to his ear, and promised Priya Delacroix a future in my house with my children, inside an empire he thought he had stolen from me. He forgot one thing. The empire was never his. I want you to sit with that for a second. Not my husband became distant. Not my husband forgot our anniversary. My husband stood close enough to my hospital bed that I could smell his cologne in the hallway, and told another woman he loved her while an IV line ran into the back of my hand. I was 29 years old. My body was failing fast enough that the doctors spoke in careful voices, the kind people use when they do not want to promise you tomorrow. And the man who had sworn to love me in sickness and in health was already discussing what life would look like once I was no longer in the way. I should start at the beginning, because none of this makes sense unless you understand what I gave up, what I hid, and what Min-jun never bothered to learn. If you have ever watched someone you loved slowly decide you were disposable, comment Shek DN and tell me the city you were watching from. I read every single one. I met Kang Min-jun when I was 23, fresh out of business school, working an entry-level analyst job at a boutique investment firm in Chicago. He walked in wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than my monthly rent, ordered an espresso he never drank, and asked to speak to whoever handled international acquisitions. That was me. I did not know yet that the quiet, unreadable man asking me questions about supply chain leverage was the heir to one of the most powerful private holding empires out of Seoul. I did not know his family name opened doors most people never saw. I did not know men stepped out of his way before he asked them to move. I only knew that when I answered him, he listened. For a woman like me, that mattered. We dated for 8 months before he told me the truth about his family. Not the polished truth. The real one. His grandfather had built Kang Industries out of shipping contracts, private security, real estate, and quiet arrangements with people who did not appear in official filings. His father ran the company like a legitimate empire with a shadow underneath it. And Min-jun had been raised to inherit both. I do not discuss everything I do, he told me one night over dinner, voice low, eyes fixed on mine. But I need you to understand that being with me means being watched. Tested. Sometimes used by people who want access to my family. I should have run. I know that now. But I was 23. And in love with a man who looked at me like I was the only steady thing in a life built on control. So I told myself I could handle the danger. What I did not tell him was that I had my own. My grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore, built Whitmore Holdings from a single dry cleaning storefront in Detroit into a private empire of real estate, logistics, and regional banking. She was not loud. She was not flashy. She did not need to be. Flash is what people use when they do not have leverage. My grandmother had leverage. By the time she passed, Whitmore Holdings was worth hundreds of millions, structured through trusts and legal walls so precise that even my own father could not touch a dollar without my signature. Her rule was simple. Nia, she used to tell me, sitting at her kitchen table with tea cooling between us, never let a man know the size of what you are carrying until you know the size of what he would do with it. So I hid it. I let Min-jun believe I came from comfortable, respectable, upper-middle-class money. A father who was a surgeon. A mother who ran a small interior design firm. True, as far as it went. I never mentioned Whitmore Holdings. I never mentioned the trust. I never mentioned that my grandmother's attorney answered to me alone. I kept a modest condo. I drove a 5-year-old car. I wore simple jewelry. I let Min-jun think he was marrying a woman with ambition. Not a woman with quiet ownership over assets his family would one day beg to access. We married outside Seoul in a ceremony his mother planned from start to finish. Lady So-yeon never called me Nia. Not once. To her, I was the American wife, the American mother, the American who smiled too easily, asked too many questions, and did not understand how old families worked. For 4 years, I let it pass. That was my first mistake. We had 2 children quickly. Our daughter Arya, then our son Theo. I stepped back from my career because the Kang family expected the wife of the heir to run the household, attend charity dinners, sit quietly at family functions, and never ask why certain men arrived at the guest house after midnight. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I would return to work once the children were older. I told myself love required sacrifice. Women tell themselves many things when they are trying not to admit they are being erased. The nanny arrived when Theo was 4 months old. Her name was Priya Delacroix, 26. Polished, soft-spoken, trained in early childhood development. Too perfect in the way people are perfect when someone has chosen them carefully. Lady So-yeon hired her personally. That should have been my first warning. Hiring staff had always been my responsibility as lady of the house. But Min-jun told me his mother only wanted to help because I was overwhelmed with 2 small children. I was tired enough to accept the lie. Priya was good with the children. I will not pretend she was not. She soothed Theo during his night terrors. She knew how to make Arya laugh. She folded onesies with surgical neatness and remembered which stuffed animal belonged in which crib. For the first year, I trusted her. That is the cruel part. I trusted the woman who would later stand beside my hospital bed holding my husband's coat while he discussed replacing me. The Kang compound sat on 11 acres outside the city. There was the main residence, where Min-jun and I lived with the children, and a smaller guest house near the tree line, where his father conducted what everyone called logistics meetings. Men arrived there in unmarked cars. Security doubled on nights no one explained. Doors closed before I reached them. In that house, I learned the difference between being married and belonging. I was married to Min-jun, but I did not belong to the Kang family. Every decision went through Lady So-yeon first. Which schools the children would attend, which charities I would appear beside, which guests I was allowed to host, what dress was appropriate for what dinner, what tone was acceptable in what room. I was treated less like a wife and more like a temporary department head awaiting review. The first time I understood how replaceable they thought I was came during Arya's first birthday. I planned a small gathering. Close friends. A cake from the bakery near my old apartment, the same bakery Min-jun used to visit when we were still just 2 people in love. Lady So-yeon arrived 2 hours before the party with her own caterers, her own guest list, her own cake. She told the staff my cake could be served in the kitchen. For the family, she said. Then she presented her cake to the guests. Min-jun watched it happen and said nothing. That became the pattern of our marriage. His mother took. I swallowed. He watched. And silence became the language of that house. The first signs with Priya were small enough that I explained them away. Min-jun worked later. Fine. He took calls in the garage instead of the study. Fine. He came home smelling faintly of a perfume that was not mine. That one I noticed. That one I filed away. Then 8 months ago, I started getting sick. It began with fatigue, swelling, pain, and a weakness I could not explain away anymore. By the time I was admitted to Lakeshore Memorial, the doctors told me my kidneys were failing and that I needed serious treatment fast. They spoke gently. That frightened me more than if they had panicked. Min-jun visited every day for the first 2 weeks. I want to be fair about that. He did not disappear immediately. He came. He sat. He held my hand while doctors explained transplant evaluations and treatment plans. One night, he fell asleep in the recliner beside my bed, his hand still loosely around mine. I watched the monitor lights blink across his face and told myself the illness had brought him back to me. I held on to that hope for 9 days. On the 16th day of my hospitalization, I heard him on the phone. I was supposed to be asleep. The medication made me drowsy, and Min-jun must have believed I was too weak to hear anything. He stepped just outside my room. Not far enough. I know, he said softly. I know it is not fair to you, waiting like this. I cannot leave while she is still in here. People would ask questions. My eyes opened. Then he said her name. Priya, once this is over, I promise you, We will do this properly. The kids already love you. It will not be hard for them. I lay perfectly still. The IV line pulled against my hand. The hospital room hummed around me, and my husband discussed my death like it was a scheduling problem. Once this is over. Not if she recovers. Not when she gets better. Once this is over. Like I was a lease he was waiting to expire. I did not cry. Something inside me went too cold for tears. I thought of my grandmother at her kitchen table. Never let a man know the size of what you are carrying until you know the size of what he would do with it. Now I knew. That night, I opened my phone and scrolled to a number I had not called in nearly 2 years. Diane Castellano, my grandmother's attorney. The woman who managed Whitmore Holdings. The woman who knew exactly what I owned. If that moment hit you, comment stillness. Because sometimes the moment before a woman moves is the quietest moment of her life. The next 3 weeks were the worst and clearest weeks I had ever lived. Min-jun's visits became shorter. He asked the nurses for numbers, kissed my forehead like it was paperwork, then left for urgent calls. Priya began appearing at the hospital with meal deliveries, laundry, and my children. At first, she acted helpful. Then she acted comfortable. Then she acted like she had already moved into the empty space my illness created. She said things like our schedule when talking about Arya and Theo. As if my children had been quietly reassigned. One afternoon, Arya brought me a drawing from preschool. A house. A sun. 4 stick figures holding hands. I asked her to tell me who they were. That's Daddy. That's me. That's Theo. And that's Miss Priya. I kept my voice steady. Where is Mommy? Arya looked at the picture, confused by the question. You're at the hospital, Mommy. I didn't draw the hospital. She was not being cruel. She was being honest. That was worse. The household had already rearranged itself around my absence before I had even been given the chance to fight for my place in it. I kept that drawing, not because I wanted to keep hurting myself with it, because I needed to remember exactly what I was fighting to rebuild. 3 days later, Priya returned to my hospital room alone. No children. No diaper bag. No soft helper act. Just a cream folder under her arm and my husband's confidence sitting on her face like borrowed jewelry. I brought some household documents, she said. Min-jun thought it would be easier if I helped organize things while you focus on recovery. I opened the folder. School contact forms. Emergency pickup permissions. Household authorization paperwork. Then I saw the last page. A revised domestic management agreement listing Priya Delacroix as primary household guardian in the event of prolonged maternal incapacity. I read the words twice. Maternal incapacity. That was what they had reduced me to. Not wife. Not mother. Not Nia. A medical inconvenience with a signature line. Priya smiled as if she were doing me a favor. You do not have to worry, she said. The children already feel safe with me. That was the first time I looked directly at her and let her see something other than weakness. Priya, I said quietly, you have confused access with ownership. Her smile thinned. You entered my house because I was sick, I continued. You touched my children because I trusted you. You stood beside my husband because he was foolish enough to think convenience was loyalty. I slid the folder back toward her. But you are not their mother. You are not his wife. And you are definitely not the woman who owns the signature this family is about to beg for. She laughed once. A nervous sound. You are very dramatic for someone who cannot even leave this bed. I picked up my pen. That is your mistake, I said. You think a woman has to stand before she can ruin you. After she left, I called Diane. Tell me exactly what I own, I said. Not the summary version. Everything. There was a pause. Then Diane said, Nia, are you asking because something is wrong or because you are finally ready to know your own power? Both, I said. What she told me over the next hour changed the entire shape of my life. Whitmore Holdings had not simply preserved my grandmother's assets, it had grown them. Over the past decade, through quiet strategic moves, my trust had acquired a controlling stake in a Southeast Asian logistics consortium. The same consortium Kang Industries had spent 18 months trying to secure exclusive contracts with. I sat up in my hospital bed. Repeat that. Diane did. Kang Industries did not just want the deal, they needed it. Their shipping division was over-leveraged. Their private security arm was under pressure. Their real estate holdings were locked behind loans and silent obligations. That consortium deal was not expansion. It was oxygen. I looked at the IV bag beside my bed and almost laughed. My husband had been waiting for me to stop breathing. He had no idea his empire was the one on life support. Min-jun did not know. His father did not know. Lady So-yeon did not know. For 4 years, they had treated me like furniture in rooms where they discussed the future of a company that depended on my signature. That was not luck. That was my grandmother. The holding structure was buried behind layers built by a woman who understood that powerful men rarely trace what they think belongs to someone harmless. I asked Diane to prepare everything. Formal ownership documents, trust confirmations, beneficial stakeholder filings, consortium control rights. And one more thing. I needed to know how long Priya Delacroix had been connected to the Kang family before she entered my home. The answer came a week later. Priya had not simply been hired. She had been placed. Lady So-yeon had personally vetted her 11 months before Theo was even born, while I was still pregnant. Not after I got sick. Before. My mother-in-law had started interviewing my replacement while touching my pregnant belly and telling me I would need help. It is a particular kind of grief, discovering that a moment you remembered as kindness was actually reconnaissance. I sat with that grief for a long time. Then I let it become useful. The final insult came on a Thursday afternoon. Min-jun arrived with Arya, Theo, Priya, and Lady So-yeon for what he called a family visit. Priya settled into the chair beside my bed as if it belonged to her. Min-jun would not meet my eyes. I thought it would be easier if Priya came, he said. She knows their schedule better than I do at this point. Their schedule, my children, my hospital room, my replacement. Then Lady So-yeon looked at all of us and said, in crisp English, "It is good the children have so much love around them. More than one mother is not a bad thing in a family like ours." I sat there in a hospital gown with a line taped to my hand and smiled. Because that was what they expected. A weak woman, a grateful woman, a dying woman who would not make things difficult. That was not who I was going to be. That night, after they left, I called Diane and said the words that ended my marriage. It is time. The plan was not built on rage. It was built on precision. We did not leak anything. We did not call the press. We did not scream. We simply exercised the rights that had always belonged to me. The first move was quiet. Diane sent formal notice to the Southeast Asian Consortium confirming that no exclusivity agreement involving Kang Industries could proceed without approval from Whitmore Holdings. The second move was my transplant. My cousin Marcus, who I had not spoken to in years after a family disagreement, turned out to be a compatible donor. When I called him and told him everything, he did not hesitate. "Family does not have to be perfect to show up," he said. I cried then. Not because of Min-jun, because someone finally chose me without needing to calculate what I was worth first. The third move happened 4 days before surgery. Against medical advice, I discharged myself for one morning. I wore the cream suit my grandmother bought me when I graduated business school, the same suit Lady So-yeon once called too aggressive for a Kang wife. I wore it because I was done being a Kang wife. I was Nia Whitmore. And Kang Industries was about to remember the name. The boardroom had 24 leather chairs, a wall of glass overlooking the city, and a table long enough to make powerful men believe distance was authority. They were wrong. When I walked in, the room did not recognize me at first. That was the part I enjoyed. Kang Dae-hun looked up from the head of the table. His lawyers stopped whispering. 3 executives froze with pens in their hands. Min-jun stood so quickly his chair struck the wall behind him. "Nia," he said, "you should be in the hospital." "I was," I answered. "That is where you left me." The room went silent. Diane stepped beside me and placed the black Whitmore Holdings folder on the table. Min-jun's eyes dropped to the gold seal. For the first time in 4 years, he looked afraid before anyone explained why. "This meeting concerns the Southeast Asian Logistics Consortium," Diane said. "Kang Industries cannot finalize exclusivity without approval from the controlling beneficial stakeholder." Kang Dae-hun frowned. "Our council has reviewed the stakeholder structure." "No," I said. "Your council reviewed what your family thought mattered." I opened the folder and slid the first page across the table. The room watched Kang Dae-hun read the name. Whitmore Holdings Group. His face changed. Not dramatically. Powerful men do not always panic loudly. Sometimes they simply stop breathing through their arrogance. "That entity belongs to you?" he asked. I looked at Min-jun. It always did. His mouth opened. No sound came out, so I gave him the words he deserved. "While you were planning a future with our nanny outside my hospital room, I was lying in that bed, holding the one signature your family needed to survive the decade." A board member whispered, "That is impossible." Diane slid over the next document. "It is not impossible," she said. "It is documented." The chief counsel reached for the folder with shaking hands. Page by page, his face lost color. Kang Dae-hyun turned slowly toward his son. "You did not know your wife owned this?" Min-jun stared at me, not the papers. Me. Like he was finally seeing the woman he had lived beside for 4 years. "No," he said. That single word destroyed him more than any speech could have. His father stood. "You brought shame into your house. You brought instability into this company. You brought another woman into your marriage while your wife was sick, and you failed to notice she held the future of this empire in her hands." Min-jun whispered, "Father, do not call me that in this room." The boardroom shifted. That was the moment everyone understood. He was not being scolded. He was being removed. I signed the document in front of them. Not the approval, the refusal. Whitmore Holdings formally declined Kang Industries' exclusivity agreement pending leadership restructuring. Min-jun looked at the signature like it was a blade. I looked at him like it was a receipt. "You stole time from me," I said. "You stole peace. You tried to steal my children's future while I was too weak to stand." I closed the folder. "But you never stole the empire." I turned toward the door. "You only borrowed it until I woke up. If you have ever been underestimated by someone who mistook your silence for weakness, comment leverage. Some of you are holding more power than the people around you realize." The fallout took 3 months. I watched most of it from a recovery room after the transplant that gave me back a future I fully intended to build without Kang Min-jun in it. Kang Industries moved fast. Not because they cared about my marriage. Men in those rooms can forgive affairs. What they do not forgive is incompetence that risks money. Min-jun had not just betrayed his wife. He had failed to understand the ownership structure behind the most important deal of the decade. That made him dangerous to the company. Within 2 weeks, the board suspended him from active leadership. Within a month, Kang Dae-hyun reassigned his responsibilities. By the end of the quarter, Min-jun was no longer the heir apparent. He called me 11 times the first week after the board meeting. I answered once. "Nia, please," he said. "We need to talk about us. About the kids." "There is no us," I told him. "There has not been an us since the night you stood outside my hospital room and told our nanny you loved her while machines were helping keep me alive." Silence. "I made a mistake," he said. "I was scared. I thought I was losing you." "No," I said. "You did not think you were losing me. You decided I was already gone. That is the difference. You did not grieve me, Min-jun. You planned around me." I hung up. I did not answer the next 10 calls. Priya was removed from the Kang household within a week. Not because Lady So-yeon suddenly developed loyalty to me, because Priya had become a liability. She called me 2 days later. I almost did not answer. Then I remembered every soft smile she had given me beside my hospital bed. So I picked up. "Nia," she said, voice trembling. "There has been a misunderstanding. Lady So-yeon told me your marriage was already over. She said the children needed stability." "No," I said. "She told you what your ambition wanted to hear." Silence. Then she whispered, "Min-jun will fix this." I looked at the custody documents on my desk. Min-jun cannot fix his own position on the board. Her breathing changed. "He said he loved me." "I believe he did," I said. "Men like Min-jun love whatever makes them feel powerful without requiring them to be honorable." She began to cry. I did not enjoy it. That surprised me. I thought I would. But by then I had learned something important. Revenge is loud when you are still bleeding. Justice is quiet when you have already won. "Priya," I said, "you were never replacing me. You were replacing the version of me they thought was powerless." Then I ended the call. Lady So-yeon called me once. Only once. "You should have told us," she said, as though 4 years of calling me the American had never happened. This could have been handled differently. I let the silence stretch. You never asked who I was, I said. You only asked what I could be useful for. The day I got sick, you decided my function had expired. She said nothing. You were never curious about me, I continued. Only about the role I could play quietly enough not to disturb your family. She did not call again. The divorce was not easy, but it was clean. Diane handled it with the same precision she used to protect my grandmother's empire. Whitmore Holdings had been structured before my marriage, locked behind a trust Min-jun could not touch. My assets were never at risk. My children were the fight. And I fought. Every text, every call, every household document, every moment Priya overstepped. Every moment Priya overstepped. Every decision Min-jun made while I was ill. All of it became part of the record. In the end, I retained primary custody of Arya and Theo. Min-jun received limited visitation under strict conditions. The mediator called it appropriate. I called it mercy. Arya asked me once if Daddy left because he was sick like I had been. I told her, no, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt people, and sometimes the people they hurt have to choose themselves. She nodded, then asked for more broccoli. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Not because it was funny. Because my children were still children. Because life continued. Because I had survived long enough to answer them honestly. 6 months later, I moved into a new home under my own name. 4 acres. No guest house near the tree line. No unmarked cars arriving after midnight. No mother-in-law controlling the kitchen. No nanny chosen before I had even finished carrying my son. Just a house with wide windows, a messy kitchen, and children who knew their mother was not a ghost in a hospital room. Marcus comes over most Sundays now. Arya braids his hair badly. Theo climbs into his lap like he has known him forever. I burn cookies more often than I admit, and Arya tells me she loves them anyway. Some days healing looks like a boardroom victory. Most days it looks like breakfast without fear. I sit on the consortium advisory board now. Kang Dae-hun negotiated it himself to salvage what remained of the deal after his son's collapse. The first time I walked into that room wearing the cream suit Lady Seo-yeon once called too aggressive, every man at the table stood. Not because I was Min-jun's wife. Not because I was the sick woman they pitied. Not because I was the American they underestimated. Because my signature controlled the deal. Because Whitmore Holdings was no longer hidden. Because my grandmother's name lived inside the structure they failed to trace. Because I had finally stopped making my power comfortable for people who never deserved comfort from me. The last time I saw Min-jun in person was during custody mediation. He looked smaller, not poorer, not broken in the dramatic way people expect. Just smaller. Like a man who had spent his entire life inside rooms built by other people and realized too late that I had owned the door. Did you ever love me? He asked before the mediator entered. I looked at him for a long moment. Yes, I said. That was the problem. I loved you enough to hide my power so you would never feel threatened by it. His eyes dropped. I will not do that again. I think about my grandmother often. About that kitchen table. About her voice telling a young woman to never let a man know the size of what she carried until she knew what he would do with it. I understand her now. She was not teaching me paranoia. She was teaching me protection. Because the world will always try to convince a woman that her power is something to soften, hide, shrink, or apologize for. I apologized for too long. I am not the woman who fainted at galas anymore. I am not the woman who let a mother-in-law rename her the American. I am not the woman who lay in a hospital bed while her husband planned a future with the nanny and believed silence was survival. My name is Nia Whitmore. I survived the hospital. I buried the marriage. I took back the empire. And this time, when I walked into the room, nobody forgot who owned it. The empire was always mine. I just had to nearly die to remember. So if you are watching this from a hospital bed, a lonely marriage, a house where they treat you like furniture, or a life where someone has mistaken your silence for weakness, hear me clearly. Sometimes the woman they replace is the woman holding the deed. Sometimes the wife they abandon is the creditor. Sometimes the empire they steal already has your name written beneath the seal. Comment check DN if you have ever had to remember your own power after someone tried to erase you. And if you are new here, subscribe for more Korean mafia romance stories where underestimated women, Betrayal, hidden power, emotional justice, and empire-level revenge collide. Because sometimes the woman they counted out is the only reason the empire was standing in the first place.